Hello and welcome, dear students. Today, our topic of deliberation is urban growth, North India, Central India, and the Deccan, craft production, trade and trade routes, and coinage. Before we talk about the today's topic, let me briefly introduce you to the main objectives. To know about the urban process during the period under study, to know about the expansion of trade and commerce, establishment of new towns and markets, and finally, to know about the status of coinage and network of roads. Early North Indian cities were built either along the banks of the Ganges River or along its principal tributaries, which served as important transportation links. Most of them served as the capitals and political centers of the earliest monarchical kingdoms. Although some of them had earthen embankment and mud ramparts, for the most part they were unplanned settlements. These early cities have only seen a small number of archaeological excavations, and none of them have showed up any traces of ancient monuments. Not until the Mauryan era, when the capital moved from Rajgriha to Patliputra, monumental architecture is unknown. In comparison to these early beginnings, urbanization pace increased after the Mauryan period. Cities became more numerous and they began to mix commercial and governmental functions. Brick was used more frequently for residential construction as well as fortification and public structures. During this time, imposing religious structures were also constructed and ornamented. The expansion of trade and the emergence of urban centers in peninsular India were not isolated events. Rather, they were closely related to other significant changes occurring in the area, such as the development of agriculture, the Mauryan expansion into peninsular India, foreign contacts, and the improvement of craftsmanship. Now we will be talking about trade and urbanization during Mauryan rule. We will be focusing on North India. The Magadhan Empire's non-agrarian economy centered around two interrelated developments, that's expansion of trade and commerce and establishment of new towns and markets. The expansion of the agrarian economy, notably in the Ganges Plains, provided a suitable economic foundation for the Mauryan Empire. However, the rise of the commercial sector allowed it to expand its resource base to other regions in the country. During this time period, trade did not develop suddenly. It was a part of a larger processes of economic transformation that had begun even before the period of the Mauryas. The Jataka stories frequently mention caravan merchants transporting vast quantities of merchandise to various regions of the country. The stability established by the Mauryan authority fostered the growth of internal trade. The development of trade was mostly dependent on a strong network of both land and riverian routes. The period under discussion saw much improvement in the development of roads. Significant trade routes to West Asia and Central Asia passed through the northwest India. The primary trade routes in northern India stretched along the Ganges and the foothills of the Himalayas. On this route, major centers such as Rajgriha in Magad and Kosambi in modern-day Prayagraj were linked. Patliputra, the Mauryan capital, had a very strategic position and was connected to all four directions by river and road. Through the city of Visali, the northern road leading to such locations as Sarvasti and Kaplavastu was connected in this way. This route connected Kaplavastu to Kalasi, Hazara, and subsequently Peshawar. However, Megasthenes mentions a land route connecting the northwestern regions to Patliputra. It was connected to central India in the south and Kalinga in the southeast. This eastern route turned south to reach Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka. The other portion of the eastern route proceeded down to the Ganges Delta to Tamil Lipti, which served as the southern and southeastern exit point. Another route led westward from Kosambi to Ujjain. This was considered Dakshin Patha and continued west to the Gujarat coast or west-south across the Narmada, that is southern route. The land route to western countries passed through Taxila, close to Islamabad. The rise of settlements in various regions of the Indian subcontinent resulted in the improvement of communication, which facilitated movement between places. This naturally encouraged commerce. As a result of the enhanced river transportation that resulted from the state initiatives to clear the trees surrounding the valleys, internal trade benefited greatly. The strategy of the state, particularly under Bindusara and Ashoka, to maintain peaceful and cordial relations with the Greeks boosted foreign trade as well. In many ways, trade was conducted. It was integrally connected to the production methods and its organization. Primarily, craft production in northern India was organized on guilds or what we call Sirini lines. This was also true in pre-Mauryan times. During the reign of the Mauryas, as the number of artisan groups grew, guilds were established in various cities and inhabited specific areas of them. Typically, members of these guilds worked and lived in close proximity. Craft was therefore hereditary, and in the majority of cases, specialization was passed from father to son. Several inscriptions attest to the fact that throughout the post-Mauryan era, these guilds attained power. Megasthenes identifies artisans as one of the 7 castes or social classes he observed during his travels in India. The prominent guilds of the time included those of various types of metallurgists, carpenters, potters, leather workers, painters, and textile workers. The production of northern black polished ware is an example of a craft production. It evolved into a specialized form of pottery making, and its availability outside the Ganges plain is limited. This suggests that the technique was established in this region of the country and was possibly dependent on a specific sort of clay available in this area. The merchants, like the artisans, were organized on guild lines. Certain types of merchants were affiliated with specific artisan groups, which facilitated the circulation of commodities. They too lived in different areas of the cities that were associated and identified with their occupations. However, it is important to note that the state administration under the Mauryas also organized trade. This administrative supervision of production and distribution increased its efficiency. This does not indicate that it interfered with and changed the guild organizations directly. In contrast, it extended its influence over the distribution of their products and became a producer itself. On a second level, it eventually transformed some crafts into small-scale industries. The state accomplished this by directly empowering craftsmen such as shipbuilders, stonemasons, etc. They were exempted from paying taxes since they offered compulsory state labor service. Other artisans who worked for the state, such as spinners, weavers, and miners, were subject to taxation. The above measures to organize commerce and commodity production constituted an integral aspect of the state policy. This policy was intended to improve the economic performance and income. Megasthenes mentions a superintendent of commerce whose duties included fixing the price of goods and intervening if there was an oversupply of any commodity. The Arthashastra also refers to him as Panaya Adhyaksha. This text provides a list of the various officials in charge of the various economic operations. The responsibility of the office of the Samasta Adhyaksha, who regulated the marketplaces, was to check the unfair practices of the merchants. The superintendent of weight and measures, or Potwa Adhyaksha, exercised strict control over the maintenance of standard weights and measures. Now Adhyaksha was assigned in charge of state boats that assisted river transportation. All merchants were required to pay taxes and custom duties ranging from 1/5 to 1/25 of their goods value. These were expected to be collected by a Sola Adhyaksha, a superintendent of tolls. Where the state manufactured commodities, different kinds of officials supervised different departments. These products were known as Rajapaniya. The state carefully selected these areas of commodity production and commerce that were important to its functioning and generated substantial revenues. Sometimes state goods may also be sold by private merchants whose distribution network was more organized and vast. Despite the aforementioned changes, it is reasonable to conclude that the bulk of artisans continue to work independently or within the complex guild organization. The guilds continue to serve the extremely crucial function of cohesively organizing and, most critically, regulating menial producers. Even the artisans found it profitable to join them, as this minimized the costs associated with working alone or competing with others in their field. From the perspective of the state, guilds facilitated tax collection. Furthermore, while they concentrated locally and specialized in particular crafts, there was an expansion of that trade. However, it is important to note that guilds did not flourish in all the regions of India throughout this period. Even during the post-Mauryan period, it is difficult to find mention of them in the extreme south. Urban milieu was also, of course, crucial to the success of the guilds. Now, we'll be talking about growth of urban economy. Urbanization, which had begun in the pre-Mauryan period, continued to expand during the Mauryan period. The towns were populated by two major demographic groups: artisans and merchants and government officials. The urban economy, characterized by the activity of manufacturers and merchants as well as an exchange system, began to spread from the Ganges Valley to other regions in western and central India, the Deccan and the South India. The proliferation of rural communities and the prosperity of the Gahapatis facilitated the expansion of the social base of urban centers. In many instances, wealthy country families established relationships with the urban communities and provided merchant groups with the financial backing they required. Mauryan period material remains to demonstrate that urban centers grew significantly throughout this period. This growth is, however, difficult to measure. According to Kautilya's Arthashastra, the state established walled cities through a process known as Durga Nivasa or Durga Vidhana. It was said that these towns were populated by priests, nobles, soldiers, merchants, artisans, and others. This text also contains through descriptions of protection of cities and their layout so that economic regulations can be properly implemented. As it did with the Janapadas, the Arthashastra considered towns, that is Durga, as an essential source of revenue. The Mauryas attributed a great deal of significance to the development and administration of cities, since the taxes collected from towns yielded substantial benefit for the state. In fact, when taxing guild in the city or Durga are mentioned, it gives the idea that people in the countryside were exempt. This was possible because urban populations were simpler to manage and organize in comparison to the rural one. The detailed account of the Mauryan capital by Megasthenes provides insights into how cities were administered and which sector of the urban economy were regulated in the benefit of the state. He informs us that 30 officials, divided into 6 committees of 5 members each, administered Patliputra. 4 of these 6 committees dealt with economic activity. These committees were in charge of industrial, art, trade and commerce, the control of public sale of manufactured goods, and the collecting of taxes on sold items. The other 2 committees were responsible with foreigners' welfare and to keep a record of births and deaths. Thus, the overall administration of law and order in the cities was essential for their economic growth to function properly. In the core of the Mauryan Empire, several similarly large and established cities may fulfill the above description. In the absence of sufficient data, it is difficult to precisely characterize the administrative structure of small cities, port cities, pilgrimage sites, etc. It is crucial to note, however, that the expansion of the Mauryan economy made it feasible for the cities of many types to flourish. The urban economy required population movement and interaction between social groups to remain healthy and prosperous. This might be maintained by establishing a certain level of political stability throughout the metropolitan and core regions of the empire. Another important characteristic of urban economy is that it fostered the growth of cash transactions and the circulation of coined currency. Despite the fact that the use of cash began in an early age, it became widespread during the Mauryan period due to the expansion of trade. The importance of cash in the economy can be judged by the probability that it was used to pay official salaries. The Arthashastra provides a list of the expected salary range, which ranged from 48,000 to 60 panas per year. For such a strong cash economy to function, the minting of coins and the availability of metals such as silver and copper were crucial. Numerous punch-marked coins, largely silver coins minted during this time period, attest to the fact that the Mauryas harnessed these resources. The majority of these are said to be from Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, which constitute the core region of the empire. For the type of urban economy that envisioned substantial state control, the state was also required to maintain monopolies in key areas of economic activity. Thus, the Arthashastra specifies a mine supervisor known as Akar Adhyaksha, whose prime duty was to seek out new mines and reopen old ones. In addition to the metal mining, the state also monopolized the salt mining sector. The significance of different types of metals cannot be understood not only for coinage but also for the production of essential items such as weapons. Thus, the Arthashastra mentions a superintendent of iron named Loha Adhyaksha. In addition to equipping soldiers, the government was undoubtedly also concerned with providing agricultural tools. Concerned with maintaining a monopoly on mining and marketing of mineral products, they ensured that the Mauryan Empire had access to the most vital raw materials. In turn, this resulted in a large return in both agriculture and non-agricultural sectors. Once economic authority over urban centers was established and their administration was well regulated, control over the different janapadas that passed through these cities strengthened. As a result of a rise in commercial transitions, the number of exchange and trade centers had also expanded. There were the various channels via which the socio-economic changes spread to various regions of Mauryan India, about which we will discuss in the next section. As with other aspects of the economy, Mauryan control of such centers varied from region to region. Now, we will be talking about changes in socio-economic aspects during Mauryan rule. In light of the foregoing discussion, the most distinctive characteristic of Mauryan economy was its emphasis on state control over agriculture, trade and industry. We have argued that state needed a variety of taxes. The demands for resources by the Mauryan state were exceptionally great. The taxes collected from Magadha and neighboring regions were insufficient to cover this demand. Consequently, attempts were undertaken to control resources in other parts of the country. Such regions include Kalinga, Karnataka, Plateau, and Western India, where Ashoka's inscriptions have been found. Different tactics were devised by the Mauryas to manage various types of economic operations in such remote places. This depended on the type of the region's available resources. The conquest of Kalinga, for instance, provided control over an agriculturally rich region and important trade routes that passed through mineral-rich regions of South India. Thus, it appears that the primary reason for capturing places such as Karnataka was that it was rich in gold and other precious minerals. What about the regions where no Mauryan inscription have been discovered? Romila Thapar has recently argued that it is difficult to assess the political or economic influence of the Mauryas in such locations. Northern Deccan, Punjab and Sindh and Rajasthan are examples of such regions. How significant is their impact on the economy of regions where their existence is indicated? In this case, it may be stated that even in these regions, no extensive reorganization occurred. The primary objective of the Mauryas was the exploitation of these regions' resources, for which they relied on important segments of the local population. During this time period, the majority of regions outside the Ganges Valley were at varied stages of economic growth. Due to this uneven development, drastic transformation and reorganization of these regions proved extremely challenging. The Arthashastra and Ashoka's inscriptions mention the tribes that inhabited the various regions of the empire. They frequently separated more developed regions from less developed regions. Kautilya advises the state to convince them to adopt a stable agricultural lifestyle. He devoted an entire chapter to how tribes could be systematically broken up using a number of fair and unfair means. This was necessarily so that permanent settlements of 5 to 10 families could be established in order to cultivate more land. Ashoka's approach towards the tribes was paternalistic, but he also cautions them that if they fail to submit or resist the Mahamatra's orders, they will be subjected to severe punishment. Controlling the forest tribes was crucial from two perspectives. First, new agrarian settlements needed to be protected from tribal disturbances which would hinder their economic development. Second, trade routes usually border or passed through tribal territories and had to be protected. It is difficult to estimate exactly how many tribal groups were thus transformed to peasants, but it is important to highlight that the state promotes the process. Archaeological evidences from several regions of India indicates that urban centers were not fully built during this time period. Numerous megalithic monuments in the Deccan and South India particularly those dated to around the 3rd century BCE, were indications of simple farming or pastoral societies with limited knowledge of craft production. It was impossible to completely alter the cultural pattern of a country as vast as India in the 3rd century BCE. But Mauryan rule did initiate some significant changes in the material and socio-economic context that bore fruits in the succeeding centuries. Some of these changes may be mentioned briefly. In various regions of the Mauryan Empire, including North and West Bengal, Kalinga and the Deccan, and the neighboring south, the earliest historical cultural patterns can be traced back to the Mauryan or post-Mauryan periods. This means that remarkable human settlements such as towns and cities where diverse social groups lived, the use of money, script, and sophisticated artifacts on a large scale did not begin in these places until the post-Mauryan period. This shift in the material culture includes not just change in technology and material existence in general, but also in social structures and beliefs. Society began to be organized in an increasingly complicated fashion, leading in the separation of social groups and ultimately in the establishment of the state. The emergence of local states in many regions following the Mauryas implies that the process of significant socio-economic transformation connected with the development of surplus in society began in many parts of India through the active contact with the Magadhan Empire and thus played an important role in the development of such regions. Dear students, it was all about today's lecture regarding urban growth in North India, Central India and the Deccan. Hope you have understood it well. See you next time with a new topic. Till then, take care and goodbye.